That's a really good question about the guidelines between interactions between individuals, and it varies depending on who the individual is that we're talking about. So if the interactions are between an adult, whether it's a staff person or a volunteer, and with a young person, the guidelines are really based along the lines to keep that young person as safe as possible. So what that means is that any sort of program that we're going to be doing is always going to have at least 2 adults that are going to be facilitating that. We don't have single adults facilitating groups of young people for a variety of different reasons. But then also, if there's anything specifically that a young person needs to talk to one adult in private for, we do have that ability to have a safe space for them to go and share with that adult that they trust. But at the same time, there's always communication happening between the 2 adults in working within the program saying, I'm going to be going with this young person, we're going to be going over here to talk about this. So there's always a communication that's happening. Everyone knows what's going on.
At the Cathedral Center, being a shelter environment, we have a lot of staff, client, volunteer interaction, and a lot of interaction between clients as well. So it's very important that we have very strict guidelines around client and staff behavior. Upon employment and volunteer placement, both staff and volunteers are given written out documentation around our guidelines for safety and behavior. In addition to that, guests upon arrival to the Cathedral Center are given expectations around behavior and guidelines during their stay at the Cathedral Center. These guidelines specify client to staff relations, staff to staff, volunteer to client, and client to client relations.
Big Brothers Big Sisters has policies and procedures and guidelines set in place for our children and volunteers to build healthy and strong relationships and to avoid any potential risk of a child's safety issue. Our volunteers are asked to follow very specific guidelines in order to protect youth in our program. Some of the examples would be, making sure that they are seeing each other the appropriate amount of times per month, frequency of activities. So we ask 3 to 4 times a month, and we really want them to fit into that, and probably spending about 2 to 4 hours each activity with that child. We also ask that they do not visit the volunteer's home in a certain amount of time and until it's approved by our professionally trained staff to make sure that that is something that the parent is comfortable with, the child is comfortable with, and we're okay with.